bodyguard accompanied his every step. Among them, a sergeant carried the gear for a satellite relay hookup for instant communication with Washington. Schwarzkopf's daily progress around the Saudi capital was reminiscent of a presidential cavalcade, though to his contemporaries, Schwarzkopf is fondly thought of as a dirty boots warrior. To his own men, he's known sometimes as Stormin' Norman, a reference to his occasional bursts of temper, and often as Bear. Like George Washington, Schwarzkopf was trained at West Point, the United States academy that produces the cream of the country's potential military leaders. While there, he made no secret of expecting one day to lead his country in a war vital to its interests. Despite a high IQ of 170, he was only 43rd out of 480 in the class of 56, though the college yearbook described Schwartzy as a connoisseur of life and an excellent competitor whose spirit would assure him of future success. A veteran of Vietnam and Grenada, campaigns which both embarrassed the United States military, Schwarzkopf was determined that his next war would be different. As long ago as 1983, he predicted that it would be here in the desert, with Iraqi ambitions the most likely trigger. 5 days before the invasion of Kuwait, he was talking his 350 officers through his own plan. An amateur magician, Operation Desert Storm was entirely his scheme for conjuring victory from the desert sands. He left nothing to chance. Its details filled a book the size of the Manhattan telephone directory. The Saudi king Fahd. Schwarzkopf's serious tasks included diplomacy at the highest level. There were, despite the appalling tasks ahead, less serious moments to enjoy.
Holding my stomach up. Yeah, I could see that. No, I wasn't either. I was just joking.
However, the grim realities of war which Saddam Hussein had made inevitable would not be long delayed. The first steps to that war came on July the 24th, 1990. Iraq amassed 30,000 troops along its border with Kuwait. At the time, the troop movements were seen simply as Iraqi pressure on Kuwait to join Saddam Hussein's demands for higher oil prices to pay for his war with Iran. A former diplomat in the region, Sir John Moberly.
Well, I don't think that it will come to actual conflict fighting with troops. I think these are maneuvers intended to reinforce Iraq's diplomatic pressure to make the Kuwaitis do what the Iraqis want in terms of the policies that will keep the oil price up.
Saddam Hussein had, nevertheless, resurrected Iraq's historical claim to Kuwait, the jewel in the crown of the Gulf. On the 2nd of August, his troops ruthlessly translated that claim into military invasion, reaching the capital, Kuwait City, early in the morning. The invasion took civilians by surprise, but Iraq's forces, although clearly outnumbering the Kuwaitis, didn't have it all their own way. From a window overlooking the American embassy, an amateur cameraman filmed a Kuwaiti armored car fighting back. Smoke poured from the barracks of the Kuwait Royal Guard, who formed the core of resistance as they fought to protect the Emir's palace. However bravely the Kuwaitis fought, they were seriously outgunned. The arrival of Iraqi helicopter gunships marked the beginning of the end. Iraqi airborne troops rapidly finished the brief but bloody struggle by Kuwaitis to retain their independence and deny Saddam his dream of domination. At least one Iraqi helicopter was brought down, the fate of its crew uncertain. Casualty figures in the invasion remain unknown, but the price the tiny country of Kuwait paid was undoubtedly high. Hundreds died trying to defy Saddam's military might. The rape of Kuwait had begun. Iraqi soldiers, not without sometimes daring opposition, were systematically to pillage and terrorize the country. Mass graves would be discovered. The Emir of Kuwait fled to Saudi Arabia, the temporary end of 200 years of rule by the Al Sabah royal family. Of the countries now in the Gulf area, Kuwait existed as long ago as 1757. What's now Iraq was then only 3 provinces of the Turkish Ottoman Empire, ruled from Constantinople. Basra, like the 2 other provinces, was rife with Arab opposition to rule from Turkey. It was Lawrence of Arabia who won Arabs to the British side in the First World War against the Turks who fought with the Germans. As a result, Britain promised King Faisal an independent Arab kingdom. Syria had already been promised to the French, so Faisal became ruler of the artificial country of Iraq. Kuwait had a much older independent existence, as this 18th century map shows. Close association with Britain, it had been a protectorate since 1891, didn't end with formal independence in 1961. Only weeks after, Britain was forced to send paratroopers and other units to protect Kuwait against the threat of Iraqi invasion, an eerie forerunner of things to come.
It's an unfinished airport just outside Kuwait, and it's pretty hot. Behind me you can see the 2nd Battalion of paratroopers coming in from Aden and Cyprus. The landing, of course, is unopposed.
Kuwaiti independence was always precarious. On this occasion, the defense of Kuwait was successful. Iraq believed the West protected countries like Kuwait because they were happy to keep oil prices low. 30 years later, Iraq could no longer tolerate low oil prices, which were wrecking its own economy. Another attempt to absorb Kuwait began. Western leaders quickly condemned the invasion. British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher froze Kuwaiti assets in London to keep them out of Iraqi hands. President Bush made his views clear.
We're not ruling any options in, but we're not ruling any options out.
We have already frozen all Kuwaiti assets. Kuwaitis have very considerable assets, and it's important that those do not fall into Iraq hands. Iraq, we believe, has only very, very small assets and rather a lot of debts, so the position is rather different with her.
At the United Nations, a new unity emerged in the face of the Iraqi invasion. The Security Council condemned Iraqi aggression in Kuwait. The old East-West divisions didn't totally disappear, but the Soviet Union did support sanctions against Iraq when the vote came 4 days later. Only 2 members of the Security Council voted against: Yemen and Cuba. President Bush did